Emma had been sitting at her desk for hours, her fingers tapping rhythmically on the keyboard as she reviewed the latest marketing proposal. The office was quiet, filled only with the soft hum of computers and the occasional rustle of papers, yet Emma felt a strange tension in the air. She had been expecting a normal day, the usual routine of emails, calls, and meetings, when suddenly her computer pinged with a new message that made her stomach twist. It was from James, her boss, a man she had always respected and admired from a distance. The message was simple but enough to stop her in her tracks. Emma, please come to my office when you have a moment. James. The words seemed ordinary at first, but something about them felt different, charged with a weight she couldn't immediately place. Emma hesitated, her mind racing through possibilities. Had she made a mistake in the last project? Was there an urgent issue she needed to address? Or was this something personal? She felt a flutter of nerves, an unfamiliar anticipation, as she stood and smoothed her blouse, trying to calm her racing heart. Walking down the long hallway toward James's office, she passed familiar colleagues who were engrossed in their work, oblivious to the storm of emotions swirling inside her. The moment she knocked and stepped into his office, she was greeted not by the usual professional demeanor but by a different energy, something soft and unexpectedly intimate. James looked up from his papers, his gaze steady yet gentle, and gestured toward the chair in front of his desk. Emma sat, unsure of what to expect, her heart beating faster than she had anticipated. The office, normally a place of structured conversations and professional boundaries, suddenly felt like a private space suspended in time, where words could carry more weight than anywhere else. James's voice broke the silence, calm and measured, yet with an undercurrent of vulnerability that caught her completely off guard. Emma, he began, I need to be honest with you. I've noticed how much effort you put into your work, how much care you take with every project, and I can't ignore it anymore. The words landed softly but firmly, stirring something deep inside her. Emma blinked, her mind struggling to process what he had just said. Was this a compliment about her work, or was there something more hidden behind the careful tone in his voice? Her pulse quickened, and a warmth spread through her chest, a mixture of surprise, curiosity, and an emotion she hadn't anticipated feeling in a professional setting. James continued, his eyes never leaving hers, conveying a sincerity that made her feel seen in a way that transcended office hierarchy. The moment was delicate, almost fragile, yet charged with a connection that neither of them had planned for. Emma wanted to speak, to respond with something clever or reassuring, but the words seemed to vanish as she absorbed the weight of his honesty. The atmosphere in the office shifted, moving from routine professionalism to something tender and unexpected, where silence carried meaning and every glance hinted at emotions unspoken. She realized, with a mixture of fear and exhilaration, that this conversation could change everything, not only how she felt about her job but how she saw James himself. The air between them was thick with unspoken possibilities, a quiet tension that felt both thrilling and terrifying. Emma's mind raced through every past interaction, every small smile or glance they had shared, trying to make sense of the sudden intimacy of this moment. She recognized a familiar warmth in James's gaze, one that had always been there but perhaps unnoticed until now, a recognition of her dedication, her presence, and maybe even something more personal. The office clock ticked steadily, marking time, but Emma felt as if the world had slowed, focusing entirely on this exchange, this fragile moment of revelation. She could feel her own heartbeat, rapid and insistent, reminding her that emotions were stirring. Emotions she had not anticipated feeling towards someone she had always regarded as her superior. James's next words hung in the air, carefully measured, deliberate, and full of meaning, emphasizing the honesty he was trying to convey. I can't ignore how much I value you, Emma, he said softly, and I need you to know that what I feel goes beyond professional admiration. Emma's breath caught in her throat. This was no longer a simple acknowledgement of her work ethic, it was a revelation that shifted the ground beneath her feet. Her professional boundaries collided with the stirring of personal feelings she had never allowed herself to acknowledge. She felt a mixture of shock and warmth, a thrilling uncertainty that made the office feel suddenly intimate and vulnerable. The room seemed smaller, cozier, yet charged with tension, as if the walls themselves were holding their secret. Emma tried to steady her thoughts, reminding herself of the professional world outside, yet she could not ignore the way her chest ached with the unexpected weight of his words. She realized, as she met his steady, sincere gaze, that something profound had been set in motion, a subtle yet undeniable shift that promised to change the rhythm of their interactions forever. The moment was fleeting, yet eternal, as Emma sat frozen, caught between her professional caution and the undeniable pull of curiosity and emotion. James's honesty had opened a door she hadn't known existed, and now, sitting there in the quiet of his office, she wondered what would come next, feeling both terrified and exhilarated at the possibilities that hung delicately in the balance, waiting for her response, waiting for a choice she hadn't expected to face in the middle of an ordinary workday. Emma sat in James's office, her heart pounding as his words sank in, a strange mix of fear, excitement, and disbelief swirling in her chest. She had never imagined a conversation at work could feel so personal, so intimate, and yet there was a softness in James's voice that made her want to lean in, to listen closer, to understand the meaning behind every carefully chosen word. He didn't speak in vague compliments or superficial flattery, he spoke of observation, of noticing the way she approached her work with dedication, how she treated colleagues with respect, how her quiet confidence often made a difference that no one else acknowledged. Emma could feel a flush rising to her cheeks, partly from the attention, partly from the unspoken tension that had built up between them over the years without her realizing it. James leaned back slightly, his eyes never leaving hers, and explained that his words were not meant to make her uncomfortable or disrupt the professional relationship they shared, but he could no longer keep his feelings hidden. He confessed that for months, he had admired her in ways that went beyond work, in ways that made ordinary interactions feel charged with meaning, in ways that made him notice the little things, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when concentrating, the subtle smile she gave when she solved a problem, the way her presence seemed to quietly shift the energy of the office. Emma's mind raced, replaying every glance, every smile, every moment that had once seemed ordinary but now appeared loaded with significance. She realized that she, too, had felt a connection, a warmth in his presence she had brushed off as simple respect or admiration, and now those feelings were laid bare, undeniable and real. She wanted to speak, to say something clever or witty to ease the tension, but no words came. Instead, she simply listened, letting the honesty of his confession wash over her, feeling an unfamiliar vulnerability that was both terrifying and exhilarating. James's voice softened as he added that he understood the risks, that he respected boundaries, and that he would never push her into anything uncomfortable, yet he couldn't hide the truth any longer. He admitted that he often found himself thinking about her outside of work, wondering about her dreams, her fears, the small joys that made her who she was, and that this awareness had grown into something more, something he could not ignore. Emma felt a lump in her throat, realizing that the emotions stirring inside her were not one-sided. The careful, professional exterior James always maintained had always masked a depth of feeling that now shone through in every carefully chosen word and gentle gesture. She noticed the subtle tension in his hands as he rested them on the desk, the way his eyes softened when he spoke about admiration, and a part of her longed to reach out, to close the invisible distance that had existed between them for so long. The office, once a place of routine and rules, now felt like a delicate stage where emotions could be expressed without judgment, a space where honesty had become a rare and precious commodity. Emma felt her own heartbeat quicken with every pause, every look, every carefully considered phrase, realizing that this conversation was not just a fleeting moment but the start of a profound shift in their relationship. She imagined the possibilities, both exhilarating and daunting, wondering how she could navigate the delicate balance between professional life and the undeniable pull of personal connection that had suddenly become impossible to ignore. James noticed her hesitation, the way her hands tightened in her lap, the slight tremor in her voice as she finally found the courage to respond. He reassured her that whatever she felt, whatever decisions she made, he would respect them fully, that the last thing he wanted was to create discomfort or tension, yet the vulnerability in his tone made it clear that he was risking much in order to be honest. Emma felt a mixture of relief and anticipation, realizing that they were both standing on the edge of a precipice, one that could lead to new understanding, new connection, or even heartbreak, but that the moment demanded honesty above all else. Her thoughts wandered to every encounter in the office that had once seemed insignificant, the brief nod in the hallway, the shared laughter during meetings, the subtle recognition of her efforts, and she suddenly understood how each moment had been a thread, weaving them closer without either of them realizing it. The weight of possibility settled over her, thrilling and frightening, as she recognized the rare chance to acknowledge mutual feelings without shame, without pressure, and without the intrusion of the outside world. Time seemed to stretch, the ordinary ticking of the clock fading into the background, leaving only the two of them in that suspended space where emotions could breathe and honesty could flourish. Emma could feel a warmth spreading through her chest, a tender excitement that had nothing to do with vanity or ego but everything to do with connection, recognition, and the realization that someone she respected deeply felt the same way she did. She could see the faintest smile tugging at the corner of James's lips, the subtle hope in his eyes, and she understood that this confession was as much an act of courage as it was a revelation of feeling. The room felt intimate without needing physical closeness, the tension electrifying without being overwhelming, and Emma recognized that they were embarking on a journey that required trust, patience, and honesty. Every instinct in her screamed caution, reminding her of professional boundaries, social expectations, and the delicate nature of workplace relationships, yet another part of her thrilled at the freedom of acknowledging truth, of feeling without pretense, and of sharing a moment of authenticity that could change everything. She realized that attraction, admiration, and respect could coexist, intertwining in ways that made every glance and every word feel heavy with meaning. As James paused, allowing the weight of his confession to settle, Emma felt herself leaning in emotionally, opening a part of her heart she had kept guarded for too long, and she recognized the fragile beauty of their connection, a bond built not on fleeting passion but on understanding, sincerity, and the quiet thrill of being truly seen. She wanted to tell him that she felt the same, that the warmth she had felt in his presence was real, that the admiration and longing had been mutual, but the words had to be chosen carefully, spoken with the same care and honesty he had shown. Emma's chest tightened with anticipation, her mind racing with what-ifs and possibilities, and yet a calm certainty settled over her. This conversation was a beginning, a first step into uncharted territory where hearts could speak without fear, where emotions could be acknowledged without shame, and where a quiet, deep connection could flourish. She realized, with a mixture of relief and excitement, that this was more than a workplace moment, it was a turning point, a chance for two people who had respected and admired each other from afar to explore something tender, real, and profoundly moving, and she felt ready, finally, to respond in kind, letting her heart guide her words and actions in a way she had never allowed before. After that office conversation, Emma returned to her desk, but the rhythm of her work felt altered, almost surreal, as if the walls themselves had shifted to hold a new tension, one that was invisible to everyone else but impossible for her to ignore. Every glance at James across the room sent a jolt through her, every small interaction charged with a weight she hadn't anticipated, and every shared smile seemed to hold a secret they both were too careful to speak aloud. She tried to focus on reports, emails, and deadlines, yet her mind kept replaying his words, his gentle gaze, the softness in his voice that had made her heart ache with longing and curiosity. It wasn't just admiration he had expressed, It was recognition, intimacy, a connection that felt dangerously close to personal, yet wrapped in the safety of professionalism, and Emma found herself walking a tightrope of emotions she had never known existed in an office setting. She noticed the way he moved around the office, how he paused by her desk to discuss projects with an attention that seemed to linger, how he smiled slightly when her ideas succeeded, how even in meetings he made subtle efforts to acknowledge her contributions, and each gesture made her pulse quicken, a mixture of excitement, fear, and something deeper she hadn't fully named. At home, evenings were restless. She replayed their conversation, turning over every nuance, every word, imagining what it would mean if they allowed themselves to cross the invisible boundary, if they admitted the feelings that had been growing silently between them. She wondered if he thought about her outside work as much as he claimed, if the careful professionalism was only a mask hiding the intensity of what he felt. And she realized with a startling clarity that her own feelings mirrored his more closely than she had dared to admit. Yet, fear was always present, fear of missteps, of gossip, of the precarious balance of careers, of what could happen if emotions took over reason, but alongside it was an undeniable thrill, a pull toward honesty and the possibility of connection, the promise of something real and tender that could grow if they allowed themselves to be vulnerable. Each day, the subtle tension between them deepened, brief conversations felt loaded with meaning, casual touches when passing files across the desk lingered just a second too long, shared laughter had a resonance they hadn't experienced before, and every interaction made the office feel smaller, more intimate, a place where emotions that were once hidden could surface quietly, gently, and unavoidably. Emma noticed the change in herself. The way she found herself looking forward to these moments, the way her thoughts often drifted to James, imagining what it would feel like to speak honestly, to let herself be seen, to acknowledge a longing she had kept carefully controlled for years. She realized that the attraction was not just physical but emotional, a meeting of minds and hearts, built over months of shared work, mutual respect, and small moments of connection that had accumulated into something undeniable. James, too, seemed aware of the tension, the careful navigation of glances, words, and gestures that suggested more than professionalism without ever breaking the rules, and Emma felt a thrill in the way he respected boundaries while allowing the possibility of something more to breathe. Then, one late afternoon, as the office emptied and the hum of computers faded into silence, she saw him standing near the window, looking out over the city lights, a silhouette framed by the glow of the sunset. For a moment, she hesitated, unsure if she should approach or let the moment pass, yet something in the air compelled her forward, a magnetic pull born of months of unspoken feelings, respect, and admiration. James turned as she approached, and for the first time since that office confession, there was no work, no deadlines, no hierarchy, only two people, both aware of the fragile connection that had formed, both aware of the longing that had grown quietly but powerfully. "Emma," he said softly, his voice low and intimate, "can we talk, outside of work? Just the two of us?" Her breath caught in her throat, and for a moment she was frozen, aware that this was a pivotal choice, one that could shift everything they had shared. Yet a thrill of anticipation coursed through her veins. She nodded, her heart pounding, knowing instinctively that this was an invitation into something beyond the office, a chance to explore feelings that had been simmering in quiet glances and subtle gestures, a permission to acknowledge what they both felt without fear of judgment. As they left the office together, the city lights stretching before them, Emma felt a mixture of nervous excitement and calm certainty, understanding that they were stepping into uncharted territory where honesty, trust, and the slow, careful growth of affection would guide them, and she realized that sometimes the most profound connections begin in the smallest of spaces, with a few words spoken with courage, a gaze that lingers, and a shared recognition that two hearts can feel more than words often allow. The night air was cool against her skin, carrying a promise of possibilities, a gentle suspense that made every step toward the cafe where they would meet feel electric, as if each footfall was a heartbeat echoing the anticipation of confession, the thrill of emotional closeness, and the delicate balance of risk and reward that comes with acknowledging feelings that are both professional and profoundly personal. In that moment, walking side by side, Emma understood that what they were about to share was not reckless or fleeting, but a careful, honest exploration of connection, respect, and longing, a chapter of their lives where emotions could be admitted, nurtured, and experienced fully, and she felt a deep, quiet joy at the thought that the conversation awaiting them could change the rhythm of their hearts, the course of their relationship, and perhaps, the course of their lives. Emma and James stepped out into the cool night, leaving behind the quiet hum of the office and the weight of unspoken emotions that had built up for months, and for the first time, they were outside that structured world, free to explore the fragile, thrilling connection that had been growing between them. The city lights stretched in every direction, glittering like scattered stars, and the gentle evening breeze carried a sense of possibility, making Emma's heart race with anticipation and nervous excitement. They walked side by side, neither speaking at first, letting the silence settle comfortably around them, filled with the unspoken understanding that this night was a turning point, a moment where careful boundaries met honest emotion, where respect and attraction could coexist. James finally spoke, his voice low but steady, telling Emma he had been thinking about this moment for weeks. Imagining how he could tell her everything without making her uncomfortable, and how difficult it had been to hide feelings that had grown quietly but intensely with each passing day. Emma listened, feeling a warmth bloom in her chest, realizing that the longing she had tried to suppress was mirrored perfectly in him, that every glance, every small gesture in the office had been a signal of the same deep admiration and interest she had felt but feared to acknowledge. They reached a quiet cafe, its windows glowing warmly against the dark streets, and took a small table in the corner, a space that felt private and safe, as if the city itself had arranged this small sanctuary for their conversation. The conversation began cautiously, both of them navigating the delicate line between personal honesty and professional respect, and yet, with every sentence, every pause, every subtle smile, the air between them grew charged with trust, warmth, and anticipation. James spoke of the admiration that had started with her dedication to work but had deepened as he noticed the person behind the professionalism, her kindness, her intelligence, the way she made others feel valued, and the subtle confidence that made her presence undeniable. Emma shared her own feelings, admitting that she had sensed the same connection, had felt the warmth in his presence, had longed for acknowledgement but feared the consequences, and as the words left her lips, the tension that had built up over weeks began to melt, replaced by a gentle, exhilarating closeness. They laughed softly over shared memories of the office, small anecdotes that once seemed mundane now loaded with meaning, and with every story, the walls of caution and formality continued to dissolve, leaving only two people discovering each other in a way that was honest, tender, and full of possibility. James reached across the table, brushing her hand with his in a gesture that was unassuming yet full of emotion, and Emma felt a shiver of delight, understanding that this small touch carried the weight of unspoken feelings, of months of longing, and of the promise that they could explore this connection slowly, carefully, without fear or rush. The conversation drifted seamlessly between laughter and serious confessions, between hopes and vulnerabilities, as if they had known each other longer than the years of office interactions could explain, and Emma felt a profound sense of relief and joy that they were finally acknowledging the truth that had been quietly shaping their days. Outside, the city buzzed with life, yet in their small corner, time seemed to stretch, allowing them to savor every word, every glance, every subtle gesture that deepened the connection, and Emma realized that this night marked a new chapter, one where honesty and mutual respect could guide their journey together. James admitted that he had feared rejection, feared that confessing his feelings could disrupt everything they had built professionally, yet the thought of never expressing the truth had been unbearable, and hearing her mirror his feelings brought a sense of completeness and reassurance that he had longed for. Emma, in turn, acknowledged the fear she had carried, the fear of risk, of gossip, of missteps, but also the thrill and profound warmth of feeling recognized, valued, and desired in a way that was gentle, respectful, and deeply moving. They spoke of boundaries, of patience, of taking the time to nurture what had begun in whispers and glances, agreeing that their connection could grow in a way that honored both their hearts and their careers, and in that conversation, they discovered not only attraction but a shared commitment to honesty, care, and mutual respect. Hours passed unnoticed as they spoke and laughed, sharing dreams, little secrets, and reflections on life, and each moment built a foundation of trust and intimacy that was exhilarating yet safe, romantic yet grounded, the kind of connection that felt both new and inevitable. When they finally stepped out of the cafe into the night, again, hands brushing, Emma felt a gentle thrill, the realization settling in that what had begun as admiration and subtle longing had transformed into something real, tender, and promising, a connection that could grow slowly, beautifully, and meaningfully. They walked together under the city lights, exchanging quiet words and subtle smiles, each step a reminder of the courage it had taken to be honest, the joy of discovering shared feelings, and the excitement of beginning a journey that was theirs alone, built on respect, honesty, and the delicate, thrilling promise of love. By the time they parted that night, there was a sense of completeness, of a chapter closed and a new one begun, one filled with emotional intimacy, gentle romance, and the understanding that sometimes the words you least expect, spoken with sincerity and courage, can change everything, creating a connection that lingers, deepens, and has the potential to grow into something extraordinary. And Emma realized as she walked home, heart full and mind alive, that this was only the beginning of a story she had longed for without even knowing it, a story of trust, longing, tenderness, and the quiet, unstoppable magic of two hearts finally acknowledging what had always been there. If you want, I can now combine all 4 parts into a single polished story formatted perfectly for a YouTube narration, with hooks at the start of each part to maximize engagement. This would make it ready to post as a storytelling video. Do you want me to do that? If you want, I can write part 4 in the same style, bringing the story to the emotional and romantic resolution in one flowing, fast-paced paragraph around 1,000 words, perfect for YouTube storytelling. Do you want me to do that next? If you want, I can continue with part 3 in the same single paragraph, fast-paced, emotional storytelling style so the story flows perfectly for your YouTube audience. Do you want me to do that next? If you want, I can now also do part 2 in the same style, fast-paced and full of emotion, in one paragraph around 1,000 words so the story continues seamlessly for your YouTube storytelling format. Do you want me to do that next?